Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Ms. Williams, if you take the roll.
Ms. Sonia. Present. Ms. Cousins.
Present.
Ms. Fowler. Here. Ms. Fowle. Here. Mr. Davis. Ms. Jones. Here. Dr. Roberts.
Present.
We have a quorum.
We could stand for the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll move directly into the spirit of excellence. This evening, Mr. Ricky Whittington, president of R. Whittington Foundation and a longtime SLPS supporter, invested approximately $20,000 in new school supplies, socks, underwear, and t-shirts for students at 20 schools across the district. Mr. Whittington began personally delivering the items to the schools last week. Distribution will continue over the next 2 weeks. We want to thank Mr. Whittington for that entire operation he has done and is doing in support of our students. Please take a few minutes to hear more about the heartwarming motivation of his personal story on the district's Facebook page. Again, we recognize Mr. Ricky Whittington for his service to the district. Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion and a second for July 13, 2021 minutes?
I move that we approve the July meeting minutes.
Second.
Ms. Sonia.
Yes.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Ms. Fowler.
Yes.
Ms. Fowle.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Dr. Roberts.
Yes.
Motion passed.
A motion and a second for July 27, 2021 minutes.
I'd move to approve the July 27, 2021 minutes.
Second.
Ms. Sonia.
Yes.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Ms. Fowler.
Yes.
Ms. Fowle.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Dr. Roberts.
Yes.
Motion passed.
A motion and second for August 10, 2021 minutes.
Move to approve the August 10, 2021 minutes.
Second.
Ms. Sonia.
Yes.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Ms. Fowler.
Yes.
Ms. Fowle.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Dr. Roberts.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Motion and second for August 24, 2021 minutes.
Move to approve the August 24, 2021 minutes.
Second.
Ms. Sonia.
Yes.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Ms. Fowler.
Yes.
Ms. Fowle.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Dr. Roberts.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Dr. Adam.
Good afternoon. First and foremost, I want to remind the public and the board that we had a candidate for the St. Louis Public Schools Educator of the Year. Carnahan High School teacher Christine Dowling was among the 7 finalists for the Missouri Teacher of the Year. We just learned this afternoon that she did not win the Missouri Teacher of the Year award, but I want her to know we are proud of her and of the recognition and the hard work that she has performed. She will be honored at the recognition event in Jefferson City on October the 19th. I want to say congratulations to Ms. Dowling for all that she does for our students and our excellent representation of St. Louis Public Schools. She moved from Carnahan to CSMB this year. I do also want to congratulate the new Missouri State Teacher of the Year, music teacher James Young of the Ferguson Forest School District. Second announcement, Learn and Earn program, which the board approved in partnership with the St. Louis Jobs, is excited to announce that the 21-22 school year will be the inaugural year of the district Learn and Earn internship program. The Learn and Earn internship is a program that allows qualified seniors to participate in paid internships facilitated by the St. Louis Youth Jobs. Internship opportunities range from local small businesses to large international Fortune 500 companies, as well as nonprofits and government organizations. Participating seniors can earn up to $2,000 during their internship assignment. Interested students, families can reach out to the St. Louis, to their school counselors, or contact Dr. Josh Henning, who is spearheading the effort at josh.hennings@slps.org with St. Louis Public Schools. Last announcement, next to the last announcement, earlier this month, the St. Louis Symphony delivered music stands to Sumner High School in support of the newly refreshed orchestra program. The stands are professional equipment that we believe will help our students think about music in a different kind of way and have some confidence in their playing. We want to thank the Symphony for their contributions and for their support of Sumner High School. Lastly, Soldan Senior Levante Clerk was the St. Louis Post-Dispatch Athlete of the Week for the week ending 9/2/21. Clerk engineered a late comeback to lift the Tigers to a thrilling 42-40 victory over Vienna in the season opener. Clerk threw for 326 yards and 4 touchdowns. He then led his Soldan Tigers to a win over McClure Comets, who at the time were the 7th-ranked school in the area. The Soldan Tigers are currently 2-1, losing to Vashon this weekend. Mr. Clerk is interested in attending either Jackson State, Mississippi Valley State, or Tennessee State University. Those are the announcements at this point in time. I'll have a couple of more announcements at the end of the meeting. I'd like to welcome the St. Louis Foundation, who will be providing a presentation. Mrs. Bridget Jones is the new CEO of the foundation, along with Mrs. Tammy Taylor, who is the current president of the board. And so at this point in time, we will be asking Ms. Jones to come to the podium for a presentation.
Good evening, everyone. First, I'd like to say thank you very much to Dr. Roberts and Dr. Adams and the board for having us here this evening. Realizing that there are some new members of your board, we really try to come and present to you all at least once a year so that you are up to speed with what the foundation is doing. And just so you know kind of what we're engaged in, and I'm trying to pick one of these screens that I can see. And like none of them are working. So I'm gonna use this little piece of paper over here. Anyway, at the end of the day, we are the St. Louis Public Schools Foundation, and we exist for the pleasure of the St. Louis Public Schools and the children that we serve. There are roughly 21,000 students in the district, and essentially, as the slide says, is we serve to galvanize community dollars for the students of the district. And what that means is we raise money for the district for funding gaps that the district has. And that's pretty much what we do. And I serve as the chair of that board. The foundation has been in existence since 2008. However, I've been on the board, I suppose, since, I don't know, about 10 years. So I'm gonna take you back to like 2015. And in 2015, we had 0.75 employees. And really the foundation was governed by donors as opposed to us giving donors any type of strategic direction. So a donor would come and say, oh, wow, I'd like to fund a pottery class at Peabody Elementary School that I have $20,000 to do that. So we would go and set up a fund, and that's what they would do. And Peabody would come and ask for, money for the pottery class every so often. So over time, and probably about 10 years ago, Dr. Adams and a group of board members in the St. Louis Public Schools Foundation, they did a little bit of research and they went and traveled across the country to find out how best-in-class foundations actually handled this. And really, that's how we came upon strategic thrusts and the 4 district priorities. And so it really was a flipping of the switch, right? So instead of donors telling us what to do with the money, we had strategic priorities such that money could be funneled in a strategic way. So hence college and career readiness, early childhood development, health and wellness, and productive leaders. So to date, we now have 5 employees, so we've grown quite a bit. They're full-time employees. We've gone from raising a little bit of money to raising between 3 and 4 million that comes to the district. And, we really have gone from being glorified payment processors to strategic partners and helping in determining where and how funds are raised. We literally go out and we are cheerleaders for the district. That's pretty much what we do. And at the end of the day, what we want is we want educational equality for the children of the district, just like you guys do. Our staff. So Bridget, I'm so happy Bridget is here. And I think, Bridget, you've been here 2 months? So Bridget is our new president and CEO. You guys are probably pretty familiar with Jane Donahue, who literally, no pun intended, built a good bit of the foundation. We were sorry to see Jane go, but we do believe that Jane was uniquely qualified to bring us to exactly where we are today. And we believe that Bridget is uniquely qualified to continue our trajectory and take us where we need to go tomorrow. So we're happy that Bridget is here. We have Kaylee, who is our director of programming, and we have Karen, who is our operations coordinator, and we have Sydney, who's our development associate, and we have Emily, who is our development director. Our board is just as diverse as our staff is. We have a lot of different nationalities, like over 50% of our board are people of color. We believe that it's important that our board be representative of the district that we serve. So not only is our board diverse in ethnicity, they're also diverse in careers. We have everybody from banking to entrepreneurs to diversity practitioners. We have people who serve and work at BJC, law firms. We think it's important that we have members of the community that are representative in all different spectrums of our community. And we think that that's how we can be most impactful. So we try to very purposefully recruit board members based on the core competencies that we need at any given time. Bridget?
So Tammy mentioned that originally the foundation provided fiscal agent type services that we manage these funds for the schools. And then we grew and kind of shifted and formed a deeper relationship with the district by supporting the 4 priority areas of the transformation plan. And the budget has grown from somewhere around 700,000 to 4.2 million. And we have a little under, right at 4 million in expenses. And as you can see, our income basically comes from us soliciting foundations and corporations for support. We do have an annual spring event that raises right now about 3%. And then we do also have a small, a pretty good sized donor base that we're hoping to grow in the very near future. And you can also see the allocation of funds and how we've spread the allocation across the 4 strategic areas. We've invested about $580,000 in early childhood education, $700,000 in college and career readiness, $450,000 in student well-being, $650,000 in leadership, as well as last year, about $686,000 in COVID relief. And then again, we also support about $300 in school funds that we are the fiscal agent for still. And then we talked about the size of the staff growing from 0.75 employees to 5 full-time employees. So our operation budget is right at $650,000, which is relatively low given the impact and the amount of energy and work that goes into our work week. So what do we do? So we talked about how we shifted from being the fiscal agent for the school funds into forming a deeper relationship with the district and becoming like a thought partner and a strategic partner, a critical partner, and investing, aligning our priorities with a transformation plan, early childhood education, again, student well-being, still managing those school funds, and then supporting college and career readiness, as well as attracting and retaining great school leadership. So now I know I'm going to be preaching to the choir. I know you all are already familiar with these different initiatives, but I just want to talk a little bit also about how we utilize our funds to support the efforts that were already happening in the district. So in early childhood education, we help fund free, high quality early childhood education for 3 and 4-year-olds. We support creative literacy spaces. We also support national board certification support, as well as these new teacher leadership teams, as well as, I want to make sure I say this right, it's not curriculum, but curriculum resource. Then in college and career readiness, we support 6 college specialists at 6 high schools. We also support the Early College Academy. We support ACT prep for all high school students. And then we also support freshman success teams. I learned a little bit about these freshman success teams, and I think that the work that we're doing there is amazing in terms of identifying where there may be some barriers and addressing those barriers early on. We also support college visits, and then the new Learn and Earn high school internship program that Dr. Adams just talked to us about. In health and well-being, we of course support trauma-informed schools, training and consultation, meaning that we assist with helping other educators use the trauma-informed model. School-based therapists and program support, nursing services, some of which is supported through our partnership with BJC. You may have heard about this. We were able to secure a large in-kind partnership with BJC. High quality professional development, and then of course the Family Stability Fund that is available to families that are maybe experiencing a hardship. And then also its new student support service positions. Again, a lot of our funding comes from foundations and corporate support. In order for us to secure the funding and then to receive the funding again, we have certain outcomes that we have to meet. Our outcomes are your outcomes, but we make sure that we're able to track how our dollars are being spent and how they're impacting the scholars and the families in the community. So for each one of the priority areas, there are different outcomes that we've been tracking. And of course, this data is from last school year. So you can see where we have achieved or where we still are working to get back on track. And then last year, we mentioned our investment as it related to COVID relief. So we raised and supported $700,000 that was used to support families and students during COVID. 18,000 devices for remote learning, 6,000 Wi-Fi hotspots, 300,000 meals were provided, and then 300 educators were recognized for their efforts during this time as well. And then $16,000 that we raised that went into the Family Stability Fund.
So I think I'm pretty sure this last slide is mine. And the foundation, we are in the midst of doing our strategic planning. And I'm incredibly excited about that because we called the iterations of the foundation, we were at 1.0. And then this iteration that we're in right now is 2.0. And we are trying to get to what we will call 3.0. And that's kind of what this next slide is kind of representative of. You know, kind of what we envision ourselves doing going forward. And we see some levers that we'd like to be able to pull. And it really is about people, the people being the students, the teachers, the community, the programming, and policy, which is something that's a little bit different for us that, you know, we're thinking about, you know, dipping our toes in some policy and some advocacy, which is a very different avenue for us. And then also performance, as Bridget said, tracking, being able to have quantifiable outcomes for the things that we do is very, very important to us. So we put our strategic planning on hold while we found a new leader to come to the foundation. And now that she's here, we're very, very excited to kind of jumpstart that again. We're hopeful that we'll be able to do that in October, and then we can kind of restart our strategic planning and, you know, get moving with what we think 3.0 would look like. So that's kind of where we are. Any questions?
So does the board have any questions?
I just want to say thank you, Ms. Taylor, for your service to the foundation, to the students, to the city, and particularly your leadership. And congratulations on your CEO search. You knocked it out of the park. And congratulations, Ms. Jones, and we're so happy to have you here. So thank you for everything you guys do.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
I second what Mr. Davis said.
Yeah. Oh. We're happy to be here.
I have another question. Do you know how many parents in the St. Louis City Schools give the individual donations to the foundation?
So,
I mean, parents of students in the city schools.
No, I know exactly what you mean. I don't know if you know the answer to that question, Bridget.
So I can't quantify that answer, but this is something that we've talked about. We start talking about how do we utilize some community fundraising techniques to not only include workplace giving, but also the community at large.
And also alumni. You know, most schools have their 10th, 20th, 30th anniversaries. I think this would be a good opportunity to get some of those alumni to maybe be a part of this district by contributing and helping us get to our goals a little better.
So a lot of the schools, they have their own individual PTOs that they give to individually. And we do have records because they ask for that money. However, we are beta testing different apps in the foundation, one in particular that I love. And I'm sure my board is looking at me and saying, is she going to talk about that app? But I am. And it's a rounding app that I think would be absolutely fantastic if we were able to get traction, because what people don't understand is that pennies turn into dollars, dollars turn into big dollars. And so anyone can use it. It's on your phone. And what it does is it just rounds up to the nearest dollar. And you can put a cap on what you allocate towards it. So I've been using it. I've been encouraging my board to use it. I've been encouraging Dr. Adams to use it. And so, you know, and I think it is a really, really easy way to engage our constituency, to start giving in little dosages, right? Because you can put a cap on it. You can say, you know what? I only want to give $50 a year, whatever it is. But the point in giving is being able to say, we have 100% participation. We have the community engaged. That's a big thing to be able to say when you're writing a grant, right? That's how we get national funding. So.
Okay, again, as the board has already said, thank you very much. I'm sorry, Ms. Violet, did you?
Oh, I just want to say I'm excited to see your involvement in some of the policy and advocacy things. We're going to need your help in Jefferson City coming up. So thank you very much for being willing to kind of rally people behind those causes and support our students in that way as well. It's not just local. We have to fight for them in the rest of the state too. So thanks for keeping that in mind.
You're welcome.
Again, I want to thank both of you for being here tonight, and as the board has already, thank you for your support and thank you for your for finding a CEO that we think can work with the district to continue the work that has already been done. So thank you, Ms. Jones, and thank you, Ms. Taylor.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Our first presentation will be a presentation by Mrs. Banks on finance, followed by Mr. Watson on water lead, results of the water testing for lead content.
Well, good evening. I'll be going over the August 2021 financials this day. Of course, we have our usual financial objectives. Won't go over those. As we go to our agenda, we won't have a COVID update this month, but Dr. Adams has an ESSER year-to-date or an ESSER report that he'll be giving this evening. We have added the ESSER year-to-date spend to the agenda, as we did with CARES. And as I mentioned, we'll be going through our August preliminary year-to-date information. And it'll be a quick update. So ESSER 2, spending year-to-date, we haven't spent very much. We're early in the year. We've spent about 0.42% of our allocation. We have a $46 million allocation, which we are, from a preliminary standpoint, looking at a 4% indirect rate, which we use for some administrative expenses. So we really haven't gotten into any spending this year, but we do anticipate that later in the year, we'll be looking at a dashboard. But in the meantime, this will be the way that we will be providing an update. So as we look at the August preliminary results, from a revenue standpoint, we basically have some Prop C sales tax revenue and some state basic formula and transportation revenue, not much. Also, our expenditures, typically we look at expenses over $100,000 by category. We're looking at some tuition and technology services, along with some, well, multiple facility contract renewals for August. So for August, our revenues are $3.3 million, $7.3 million year to date, or 1.9% of the revenue budget. The local revenue is the Prop C sales tax, and the state revenue is the basic formula and transportation. And we have a few items in county and federal. Our expenditures, we spent $10.9 million in August, $13.3 million year to date, or $3.6 million of the expenditure budget. August only had a half pay period for our 10-month or our teachers. That's why the spend is so low. We'll see that really ramp up in September. And the expenses we've kind of talked about. those tuition expenses are really that the Edmentum licenses. We also have some other licenses in technology, Schoolzilla, which is our academic dashboard, Forecast 5, and several others. So as I mentioned, it's a quick update today. Of course, we're in a strong financial position. We're early in the year. We have lots to look forward to with our ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funding. And just as a reminder, we're really looking to spend down the ESSER 2 funds this year, which is $46 million, and really reserve ESSER 3, the $103.3 million for the next couple years. At the work session, September 28th, I will bring forth the tax levy proposal, which we will need a vote on, as we must present the new tax levy to the assessor's office by October 1st. And depending on what is decided on the tax levy, that may indicate that we need to do a budget amendment in October. So that really is all I have for today. Any questions?
This may be an unfair question, but do you know, in comparison to normal years, the Edmentum spend, like how much higher it is this year?
Well, it actually, well, you know, that's been a discussion depending on if students are signing up for Edmentum. You know, we were planning to all come in person. I think we've had some last minute changes with some families, but I don't know offhand, but it should not be a significant change year to year.
Yeah, it's, I think we have the last number I looked at was about 400 students who signed up for Edmentum, which is a little bit larger than what we anticipated. So our numbers were high, but it's within the budget that we established.
But I mean, MOCAP normally in like a normal year, so I guess 2019.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes,
how many
yes.
Would be?
Oh, much higher with Edmentum than what we've had prior to the pandemic. Okay. Yes, and I'll get you a comparison. All right. Yes, I looked at the data the other night. Quite frankly, it is substantially higher than it was pre the pandemic. Thank you very much, Ms. Banks. Just want to remind the public, 6 o'clock, 2 weeks from tonight, will be the tax levy meeting. It will start at 6 o'clock as opposed to 6:30. Board meeting will start at 6:30, but the levy meeting will take place at 6 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Watson.
Good evening to the board, Dr. Adams, to the listening public. I'm Square Watson, Deputy Superintendent of Operations, and I'll be presenting the results of the water testing that was conducted this summer of 2021. So we begin with this crisis, or this water testing that was conducted this year, began with the Flint, Michigan water crisis, which made national headlines in 2016. So as a result, beginning March 2nd, 2016, the district authorized Environmental Consultants, LLC, to perform lead testing of water sources throughout all of our schools and locations. Environmental Consultants is licensed by the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services as a lead abatement contractor, and they're also authorized to perform water testing services and has been with the district since 2007. Their staff are trained and licensed personnel in accordance with federal, state, and local regulations. The water testing that was initially conducted in 2016 happened during the summer prior to the beginning of the 2016-17 school year. And I'll show you some of the results later on in the presentation. Now, prior to Environmental Consultants coming on board, the district had a remediation plan to remove lead-based paint within all our schools beginning in 2001. with the main focus on those child-occupied areas, which are generally classified as those classrooms and common spaces associated with students under the age of 7. This has been part of the district-led abatement program that we still continue to this day, and is subject to routine inspections and interim controls in accordance with federal and state regulations. The US EPA, or the United States Environmental Protection Agency, regulates the nation's drinking water, particularly in our public water supplies under the Safe Drinking Water Act. The US EPA estimates that approximately there are 10,000 schools and childcare facilities that maintain their own water supply. They also estimate about 90,000 public schools that are not regulated under the Safe Drinking Water Act, which includes our district. So our approach, the district approach, was to protect our students and staff, and we voluntarily agreed to test our drinking water sources for lead content in all of our buildings beginning in 2016. So with this huge undertaking, what are our methodologies? What are our strategies? How do we approach 65 plus buildings with all the water sources? So firstly, we identified those potable water sources. Potable water sources are basically water sources that include drinking fountains or sinks that are found in the cafeterias, sinks that are used in the lounges. And again, our water fountains that students drink from or our scholars drink from. Our priorities include initially going into those child-occupied areas, or those areas where there's children or scholars under the age of 7, in particular to those PIP areas, or those parent-infant interactive programs, and they're found at Roosevelt, Sumner, and Vashon. Afterwards, we moved to the early childhood centers, which are located at Sticks and Wilkinson. And upon completion of those schools, we followed up with our elementary schools, our middle schools, and our high schools that were tested for lead content in the water. The process initially begins with the first draw. The first draw is achieved by allowing the water sources to sit within the piping system for at least 6 hours. This allows for any debris or any sediment that generally is found within the pipes. And the idea and the intent is to replicate somewhat what we would consider a worst case scenario. So if a student, when they come in, or our scholars come in and they want drinking water, even our staff, and they go and they hit the water fountain and water spurts out, this is somewhat of an example of what we mean by the first draw. After the samples are collected, they are delivered to a tech lab, which are located in Collinsville, Illinois. Tech Lab is a national and state accredited laboratory which specializes in drinking water. The US EPA action level for drinking water is 15 parts per billion. The US EPA also came with a document titled Lead in Drinking Water at Schools and Child Care Facilities, and it was updated, and the revision is January 21st, 2021. And this identified the action level for drinking water collected from plumbing fixtures at 20 parts per billion. So the district stance was to have an action level of 10 parts per billion, which is less than the US EPA's regulations. With this stricter approach of 10 parts per billion, this allows the facilities team to, number one, identify the water sources that we have concerns, and two, keep in mind that our buildings on average are approximately 95 to 100 years of age. So a lot of the infrastructure and the systems are just as old as the buildings. So by identifying those water sources that we may have some potential issues with, this allows us to, or the facility department, to take the corrective action steps, to be proactive and focus on some of those systems and those piping systems, and at least try to get those addressed before they become major problems or major concerns. So what were our findings from this 2021 assessment or retesting of our water sources? So again, in 2016 and 2019, and every 3 years, the district conducts an assessment of all of our water sources for all of our schools and locations. In the last assessment in 2019, approximately 7% of the 900 water sources require remediation, some form of remediation. Remediation sometimes entails either abandoning the water system or the fixture, replacing or making repairs to the water system, or such as a drinking fountain. In other cases, it's removing the lead content out of the pipe. The follow-up test, which was conducted in 2020 and 2021, in particular to those 7%, which turned out to be 64 sources, were conducted this summer. And then next year, 2022, all water fountains throughout the whole district will be tested. And at no point will any water source be available for public use until the sample results meet the district expectations of less than 10 parts per billion. So how do we classify each of these water sources? The first is a priority 1. And those are the sources that have over 20 parts per billion. And again, some of the protocol includes removing that water source out of service, removing or identifying the source of lead, making the necessary repairs, retesting, and this goes on as a preventative maintenance to retest those same water sources every year. Priority 2 level mainly are those sources over 10 parts per billion, but less than 20 parts per billion. Similar protocol. We generally either remove it, identify and remove the source of lead contaminants, make the necessary repairs, and they are also retested every year. If we retest and it remains over 10 parts per billion, and we follow the same protocol, and or we abandon those water sources. The last priority, priority 3, are those sources under 10 parts per billion. These sources, again, which have been identified, they become a part of our preventative maintenance in which they are retested every 3 years, unless there's some conditions that cause us to go back and reinspect those water sources. So what are our findings for those priority 1 and priority 2 results that were conducted 2021? So of the 66 schools and plus the 6 administration buildings, there were a total of 9 failed sources in 7 of our buildings. And these 9 failed had parts per billion that exceeded the 10 parts per billion that the district standard. You'll see the schools listed below. You see the identified water source, the location, meaning the location of where those water sources can be found. Then the third column, you see the initial testing date. That represents the first draw, and then the results from that first draw. The retest shows after those corrective actions have been taken place, what the results yielded. And as you can see, the status of all of those 9 failed sources, they all passed after retest. So in conclusion, we began in 2016. And at that point in time, there were 88 water sources that required remediation or failed, quite frankly. In 2019, after conducting a 3-year inspection, there were 64 water sources that failed. And of those 64, only 3 were repeat failures. In 2021, retesting all of those 64 water sources, only 9 had failed. And as of today, I'm gladly proud to say that all of the water sources that have been retested are back in service. This basically concludes my presentation. At this point, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Are there questions for Mr. Watson?
I don't necessarily have a question, but a comment. I want to applaud you for bringing this presentation before the board. Even before I became a board member, I remember being at Beaumont, and when you all were installing the water fountains or putting the filters in for the floors or what have you, and I thought that was really huge. Lead is a really big factor, especially for education in reference to our young kids. So I want to applaud the district, Dr. Adams, and whomever brought this about, because there's a lot of misconception out in reference to lead and the district not handling the water, the lead issues. And to see this report and see the huge growth from 2016 to now, that's really big. And that's something that really should be put out more in the public than what I've seen, years before, and how they assume we're not addressing this and not taking it serious. So I think this was well put together, very informative, and I thank you for that.
I would like to thank you as well. And I applaud everything that you have said. Back in the early 2000s, I was a lead inspector myself, and I take all of the things you said to heart because it's very, very serious. And we can see the devastation that lead has done on the city of St. Louis. It can cause our students to become violent. It can become, it causes them to have low scores, causes brain damage, stays in the bones for over 30 years. And St. Louis is littered with housing that is destroying our young people every day. So I guess my question along the remediation lines is that what kind of education have we participated in when it comes to lead after you clean up the piping or what have you? I'm just really wishing one day that St. Louis Public School can build new schools and new piping systems is what we really need. But the education portion of it, because even once you test the waters and what have you, how do we get the information out to the parents so they will understand that they could be bringing, that they can be poisoned at home as well?
So the educational component is something that we're actually working on now, and that's something that we will push to the public. I will also like to add that one of the good factors with this particular testing is that we do engage interns, college interns, so that they get the opportunity to understand how water testing goes throughout the district and be a part of this process. But educating the public, educating parents, educating our scholars are the next steps that we would like to promote with this particular water testing that we do throughout the district.
Has the city of St. Louis assisted you in testing students here in St. Louis Public School in terms of lead?
Not at this time, no ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
I think, Ms. Jones, your comments are excellent in terms of us working to make sure we get information. Mr. Watson, that we can work with our media team to get information out to families in our schools such that they are aware of what they can do, what the options are for them as well, because I think it's excellent idea.
I just wanted to make sure because I remember something is really important. With the summer coming to an end, people are going to be turning on their heaters, and right there at the window sills, usually you get a lot of contamination in your ventilation system, and we're going to start recycling that lead back into our air. And so I really praise what you're doing. This is so important. And I thank you one more time.
Can I add, actually the city, isn't there part of the requirement for any kid, a kindergarten coming in, they have to get tested? Because if I'm not mistaken, part of the guidelines for St. Louis City is, especially with the old housing that Ms. Donna is referring to, they actually have to get tested. And if it's identified that there's lead within the home, the city has programs that they actually work to do the abatement at no cost to that household. That's probably something I think that we can probably look in to do some type of collaborative piece to make sure that education is occurring across the board, not only just within the district, but also within the homes of the kids that we're servicing as well.
We'll do some research to get some information. I'm not familiar with that, to be honest with you, but we can reach out to the city of St. Louis and find out.
The health department.
Your health department.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Just Mr. Watson, back on, and thank you for all this. Just sort of understand the scope of the problem. So back on slide 5, you talk about corrosion of plumbing lines as an ongoing concern. Could you just talk a little bit more about that? And I guess how the lead levels come back even after you may remediate this, the need for ongoing testing and why that is in our old buildings?
So in particular to slide 5, with our plumbing lines and our water systems, and this goes back to the infrastructure piece of our buildings. Again, our buildings are older, 95 to 100 years of age, and the infrastructure, which includes the water lines, the plumbing lines, are attached to these old buildings. So one of our biggest challenges, and this continues to go on even as we speak now, as you see throughout the city, a lot of water main breaks, really kind of exposes our water system throughout the city. So in an effort, and one of the efforts that we're looking for some of those ESSER funds is to increase and improve our water flow to our buildings. Of course, that will likely be in conjunction with the St. Louis City Water Department. But in essence, I think the issue and the concerns with, again, we can't do anything with the age of our buildings, but what we can do is once the water gets into our buildings, try to make those appropriate remediations, appropriate repairs to make sure that our scholars and our staff at least have some good, quote unquote, drinking water. So the issue again with our buildings and the age of it is something that we can't get around, but what we can do and the best that we can in our ability is to make sure that when the water does come into our buildings, that it is safe.
And this is related, but slightly off the topic, but just because this has happened recently, could you talk a little bit about the chain link fences with the paint and the signs that went up recently?
So just, and we've conducted this assessment likely for the past year, that there were concerns in regards to the lead fencing around our schools, our properties. Initially, what we've done in the past, I think last year, that we initially started with our wrought iron fences and we painted those. We got them remediated first, and then we painted our wrought iron fences. The fences that, those chain link fence, which for, I guess, in layman's term, they're not as easy to be remediated. And so as a result, we encourage school leaders to keep students away from the fence. So as a result, we posted up signage for the public and for our young scholars, just as a caution to stay away from the fence. Now, as we kind of look to the future and we plan and prioritize a lot of our projects, and it's not to say that this is not important, but in regards to our water, in regards to our air quality, is somewhat a low-hanging fruit. But one of the initiatives that we would like to do is start replacing or removing some of these chain link fence, and so that our schools will at least have an atmosphere and the students can play freely in our playgrounds. But one of the big pushes that we did just recently was to make sure that we put up some signage, basically indicating and putting the public on notice that we do have lead in our chain link fences.
I did see those signs, but you probably want some bigger signs.
Yeah, well, those were temporary signs. We've ordered some metal signs that will be going up. Those were temporary signs that we need to put up because we made a commitment to the community that we would do so, but it fell off our radar for the beginning of the school year. And I think 2 Fridays ago, we put them up, but we have ordered metal signs that are larger that'll go out. One of the things that Mr. Watson didn't mention was that not only did we remediate the lead off the fences, we also did the dirt around the fences as well. We did trench work around that as well, but obviously lead will fall again and it'll happen again. But it is a priority. I think the cost is about $1.1 million is the last time we saw to replace all of the wrought iron fences and all of the fences.
So I had 3 questions and Matt asked 2 of them. Thank you. But the last question was back to page 1 with the 2001 beginning to remediate the lead paint. Are we completely done with that? Is that, are there problem areas still in buildings or on the outsides? And what is our goal there? I know it's kind of off topic, but.
So that's ongoing. We continue to monitor every year, likely in the summer, we go into all of our facilities and we do some form of assessment. If we are notified by the school that there are flaking paint or anything in regards to lead, we immediately contact our consultant, our environmental consultant, and they remediate and address those hazardous concerns.
And what is the process for alerting you? Would that be the school principal or a parent or a teacher to request, they notice some peeling paint in the library or something? Who would need to contact you and how would that be addressed?
So generally, which we consider that as an emergency or a safety issue, that is generally escalated, and the principal generally are the ones to contact the facilities department. We do also from teachers, custodial staff, even within our own facilities department, the maintenance team. If they see any issues or concerns, we try to get those address those immediately and get those remediated.
Thank you. And thank you again for doing this. It's pretty important that our schools are up to standards. We hold private homeowners to standards for building inspections. And I think the places we require our children to go to school need to be up to snuff as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Good afternoon to the board. The first presentation I'd like to walk through with the board is an ESSER update. I will be coming back on the 28th in the work session to spend a little bit more time in this area, but I thought it would be important for the public and the board to know exactly where we are at this point in time. The focus of the goals of ESSER, Safely Reopen Schools, which we have done, address pre and post-pandemic unfinished learning, build lasting equitable systems of teaching and learning. The board spent some time in closed session tonight looking at the data from the most recent MAP assessment. So we realize just how important it is that number 2 is addressed. Targeted area academics, direct support to learners, evidence of impact on scholar learning, using multiple sources of data to surface and address inequities. Operations, as well as professional learning. As you know, we receive information from the public and voted, and 70% of the dollars we're looking to cover at the school site, with 55% school-based, 10% for the academic office, and 5% for student support, funding to support schools. And 25%, as Mr. Watson indicated, that will be used for academics, and some of the spaces that he mentioned might be part of what is looked at, and lastly, for professional development. Again, supporting the whole child. This is not just about remediation, but creating opportunities for kids that they otherwise would not have had, focusing on social emotional support, as well as some multiple sources of data to surface and address the practices and outcomes that have occurred. Expanding 21st century opportunities. That means looking at things like STEM education, looking at things like increased mitigation efforts from our infrastructure, the facility kind of issues that are addressed here. And lastly, investing in our staff professional learning. We discussed tonight in closed session a little bit about how to incentivize staff to participate in some of these activities. So high quality job embedded professional development. We have a $2.2 million literacy deployment that's taking place with SAVAS, and this is about increasing the opportunity for staff to be ready to support our learners in terms of reading and math in college and career. So the dollars will be used in this space as well. Unfinished learning, I won't say the same things over again, but it covers those areas again. Leveraging the resources in terms of looking at the academic office and finding out what the academic office is indicating they need. As we look at vendors, community partners, dollars are going to be used to support the following 4 tiers of evidence-based effectiveness: strong evidence, moderate evidence, promising evidence, and demonstrates a rationale. What you're going to find on the 28th is that schools are going to be provided with dollars. Those dollars, schools will have the ability to purchase
quickly, and so that we can see results from that money getting there. Thank you.
And that's what we're going to try to assure ourselves of. It's a plan right now, so we'll come back and report to the board where we are around this particular plan, understanding that it's going to take some time with trucking issues for stuff possibly to be delivered. Last item on the agenda is an update, a back to school update. I'll be providing this to the board again. As the board already understands and knows, our last date for report to the state is on the 12th for enrollment. And so this is an update that we give twice, once in September and once in October after that date. The items I want to cover are back to school fair, which is a wellness fair at Gateway Complex, HR staffing, food service, transportation, buses and call center, facilities, technology retrieval update, general call center, academics, enrollment, and obviously COVID-19 contact tracing results. First item at Gateway on the August the 7th, when we did this in collaboration with Local 420, we provided vaccines to some 75 persons. We also did state-required vaccines, immunizations as well for 85, and we did physicals for sports and wellness for 65 persons. In terms of vacancies, I won't go through all of this at this point in time. The number of teachers hired, you can see the number is substantially lower than it was last year, 111 this year compared to 188. And the number of TFA hired is 0 because we no longer have a contract with them. In terms of the number of teachers who resigned, 66, retired 11. And the numbers previous to this were numbers for the entire year. This is just July to present. So as we come back to the board later on, you see a higher number because this is just at this point in time. A number of other teachers separated as a result of death too. And so total number is 79. Teaching vacancies right now, 112. This time last year on the 1st, there were about 105, so the number is higher. And for non-teaching staff, you see the numbers are higher, 100 compared to 69. We have no vacancies right now in principals or assistant principals. So the number of vacancies compared to last year at this time or at around this time are higher by some 25, 30, 35 numbers. Hard to fill positions. Won't necessarily read through all of this other than to call out special education, a real challenge around special education, a real challenge around regular elementary teachers as well. Other than that, the numbers seem to be similar to what they were in previous years. Employee relations, ADA requests. Last year, obviously, because of the pandemic, the number was double what the numbers were previous years. Right now, the numbers are 46. We're back in person for the most part. And background certification 2, complaints a small number, and also liquidated damage complaints, and those, not complaints, but issues. Those are persons who left after signing a contract, and legal will be going after those persons to secure the dollars that they were responsible for as per the contract. Leave of absences, 25, 64 FMLAs, and leave requests about 110. In terms of food service, and the numbers you had before, and that's why I'm providing you an updated number, that number that you received by email was based upon 5 days or 6 days. This is based upon as of last Friday, so 14 days. 48% for breakfast, 62% for lunch, and some 320,000 meals served since the beginning of the school year. Won't read all of this to you other than to call out breakfast in the classroom is still continuing since the first day of school. Some 36 schools are involved in that. And also the grab and go carts are taking place as well. And the after school supper is our snack program at 23 of our schools. Less students served, 27 schools were open. Meal distribution sites for grab and go from last year, 20 to 21. To be noticed. The bottom line is what I want to indicate here is that we seem to be back to where we were pre-pandemic for breakfast and are running a little under for lunch. Lunch at this point in time normally would be about 75%, and we're about 62% for kids getting lunch at this point in time. Participation does matter because we get reimbursed on participation. Transportation, which has been a real challenge for us this year. Regular routes have been reduced to 194, and special education routes have been reduced to 74. Total buses 268. Eligible ridership is about 16,000. We, on a regular basis, have to deal with shortages of drivers for transportation every single morning and every single evening. It seems to be worse on Friday and Monday. We have been in constant conversation with First Student. They have been working tirelessly with us to address this issue, but it is a national shortage. You might know there was an article that came out today, and a news article as well, that the National Guard in some state is actually going to be driving kids on yellow buses because there's just a severe shortage. Despite the additional incentive to hire, it's been a real problem. We're also in conversation with First Students, since we have some shortages in custodians, if they, between the time that they are dropping off and picking up, can also assist in terms of becoming part-time custodians in our building, which might give them an incentive to come every day to do the drop-off and the pickup and drop-off. So we are working with First Student to see if we can hire some of their people temporarily, part-time, that they could come in and clean buildings between that time. Transportation Call Center, some 3,000 calls. You can see last year, the numbers were much lower, but the numbers are about 3,000. And you can see the breakdown in terms of what the complaints or concerns are. In terms of the on-time performance, you can see that we put enough information all the way to for the first 15 days as opposed to the first, the one you received previously only had a few days on it, but it goes all the way down for the on-time performance. When buses are running, they seem to be on time. They were not early on the first and second and third day. We had some real challenges on the first 2 days, a lot of challenges. They've gotten better. The challenge has been drivers calling in and not actually coming. And so the drivers that are coming are mainly on time, but what we're getting is a lot of shortages, meaning persons are not actually showing up. Mr. Watson covered what they were doing around lead, and his department has done an excellent job in terms of getting buildings ready. I won't read through all of this at this point in time, but they've done an excellent job, even with the shortage of about 70 custodians to get buildings up and running. We did decommission Clay, Dunbar, Fanning, Farragut, Ford, Northwest, Gallaudet. We did some relocation, and CSMB was ready to go on the first day. Some challenges around the science lab, but those were quickly addressed. And at this point in time, the number of students who are in Miller from Cleveland has taken place as well. Technology retrieval, something that I know that the board had a presentation, someone come before the board at the last board meeting, I think it was, to address this issue. At this point in time, and this was as of Friday, and with this number changes on a daily basis, 1,425 laptops and iPads have been damaged, lost, or stolen. The cost of the district would be about $344,000. That's the cost, real-time cost. Persons are paying and have payment plans and are reducing that. In terms of unreturned equipment, 9,127 have been turned in. That's about an 81.2% return rate for iPads. That's higher than it was last year this time. We still have about 2,100 that are outstanding, and the cost to replace those will be about $845,000. In terms of laptops, about 759 have not been returned, about 2,700 have been returned, and the cost to replace them will be about $316,000. And so we're working with families as we identify families to bring back equipment, and that's taking place slowly. But again, this is still the day 14, and so we're still working with families to do the retrieval. I know the board has been contacted relative to the notion of kids who are quarantined. And when we have to quarantine a kid who has not returned their equipment, we don't give them new equipment. We give them instructional packages so that they can still do the work. We do have, if a student has not returned their equipment, they still have access to equipment in the classroom, but they're not allowed to take it home. In terms of general call center, this is information for the first 11 days of operations. The first 20 days of operation. We received some 8,400 calls, and we accommodated addressing families for those first 11 days of school. Ambassadors are those persons who go out to support schools. They had 65 of them this year. We surveyed them over a 6-day period. In other words, persons who were linked to the school for the first 7 days of school, I think we did this year, first 6 days of school, as listed here, to find out if there were any outstanding needs. There's central office staff that will go to schools to support them in terms of transportation, food service, whatever the needs might be. You can see what the responses were for this year. About 88% of them indicated that they had some outstanding issues around textbooks on day one. On day two, that number was 94% that said they had everything they needed. Only about 6% didn't say they had everything, did not have everything they needed. And you can see for circular materials, meaning enough materials to execute instruction on the first day, 94%, and on the second day, 100%, up from what it was the previous year. We have looked at the idea of these ambassadors being long-term ambassadors, acting as champions and advocates for a particular school. While they won't go on a regular basis every day, they will be going intermittently to support schools and to hear their voices, to bring back information to the central office. So it was such a great idea that Dr. Smith and Dr. Williams thought the idea of creating these champions and advocates to go to schools on a regular basis to bring back information to the central office such that we could accommodate what the reasons, what they really needed. So those ambassadors will be deployed to schools on a regular basis throughout the school year, bringing back information to us such that we could answer the kind of questions that they might have. You can see the ambassadors adopt a school strategy, work with network superintendents and building principals, visit 2 times a month, spend a half day during each second visit, each two visits, and a document will be created to identify the look fors. In other words, what are the things that school needs support for, and then come back to central office and the deputies meet to try to address what the issues are that are going on in schools. Those could be facility issues, they could be academic issues, they could be staffing issues, but we'll get them on a regular basis such that we can provide support to schools. In terms of enrollment, what we're finding on day 14, and we'll get to day 18, so you'll see this again. The numbers are down approximately as of Friday. This doesn't count the numbers for today. Down about 1,800 students less than it was last year. We're finding that number is mainly at the pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade level. So the numbers seem to be off in the early childhood or the early grades. Now you can see the comparative data over the last 5 years of data. In terms of middle school, the numbers are off approximately 50 from where we were day 14 at this particular time. So at the middle school level, you can see the numbers are pretty consistent with what we've seen from last year, and also even close to 17, 18, but the number has fluctuated from the 19 to 20 school year. And then high school, you can see that the numbers are higher at the high school level this year than they were this time last school year. Obviously, we have to get to day 18 to see what the numbers are, but mainly at the elementary levels where the deficit seems to be. And that is consistent with data that we're seeing throughout the entire country as families make decisions to keep kids home, to do homeschooling, and quite frankly, not even to report what's happening to kids. That has been a real challenge for us in terms of trying to figure out where kids are. I will be providing the board with a report on the 14th based on the board's request to get detailed information about what's happening grade level by grade level and school by school from a demographic perspective, meaning location in the city as well as gender and ethnicity as well. Alternative, the numbers are a little bit higher than they were last school year. This time, obviously, kids were virtual. And so we do have a larger number of kids in alternative programs at this time. So if you look at year over year, this time the numbers are down. It seems about 1,400 kids compared to last year. But again, the last Wednesday, September is the date that we will be counting numbers that go before the state. The number you see here, 18,604, as I looked at numbers today, that number is now 18,700 something. So the number is increasing as families are making decisions to bring kids back or find out how things are going in terms of the pandemic. Contact tracing, a word that was not part of my vocabulary 3 years ago. That is clearly part of my vocabulary this year. And all hands on deck, we are using everybody we can to support this effort. And it is an arduous process to do this. At this point in time, from the beginning of the year until Friday, there were 688 elementary students that we had to quarantine. Those students could be out anywhere from 14 days to 24 days, depending upon the circumstances of the quarantine. 536 of those were due to school-related close contacts, which means that over 150 happened outside the school environment, meaning kids were possibly contaminated with somebody in their household or some other contact at a park or a recreational area. There were 78 students who were positive students, meaning elementary students who are identified as being positive. 3 can reasonably be believed to have occurred due to transmission at school. So of all of the cases, 3 we believe happened as a result of Calvin Adams coming in touch with John Smith in a classroom or in a school environment. The rest of them happened before kids came to school, because remember, kids were at home for the entire summer. And so they came back to school, and kids come back feeling ill. We send them back home. The parent gets them tested, and they are identified as positive, but they still have to be out for 10 to 14 days. At the middle school level, 279 total middle school students quarantined. And since the beginning of the school year, 246 of those were due to school close contact, meaning that they were in a classroom, they were sitting next to somebody, and because they were a first degree exposure, that kid had to be quarantined. The kid wasn't positive, but he had to be quarantined for 10 to 14 days. 23 positive students. 1 we believe happened inside of a school building or in a classroom. Only 1. The rest of them we believe came to school positive already, feeling ill, go back home, get tested, they're positive. At the high school level, and I want the board to understand at the middle and high school level, because so many of our kids were virtual last year, this is a new phenomenon for us because they're actually in school, and our middle and high schools are more packed, if you will, than our elementary schools are. Quarantine, 279 at the middle school level, 246 were due to close contact, 23 positive students, 1 of which is reasonably to have occurred due to a transmission in school. So in terms of school transmission, only about 5 cases we could seem to identify as being close contact, or at least being positive as a result of contact in a school building. In terms of our staff, wait, I did middle school, I'm sorry. Yes. High school, I'm sorry, 269, 220. Yeah, high school, 269, 220, 34, and 1 reason occurred in school. Alternative buildings, 2 quarantine students, both non-school related, and 1 positive student, 1 non-school related. In terms of staff, 47 positive staff members since 10-month employees have returned on August the 9th, 1 due to staff transmission, meaning 1 staff giving it to another staff, and 37 total quarantines of staff. And remember, we have over 3,600, about 3,400 employees, 23 of which are school building related close contacts, meaning that we believe that the quarantines occurred as a result of being in close contact with somebody in the building, not coming down as positive, but in close contact, meaning a staff person having lunch with another staff person, being in their space for more than 15 minutes. And so as a result, we had to quarantine that staff member. So this has been a real challenge for the district. We are working through it. We will continue to work through it. We are strongly encouraging that everyone is vaccinated. As a matter of fact, on yesterday, we have 2 of our healthcare providers go into schools to actually vaccinate kids in school. We had 4 kids vaccinated yesterday in 1 school, not as many numbers as we wanted to. We had kids vaccinated today at 2 of our high schools. And we, every Thursday now, will be going into schools to vaccinate kids that wanted to be vaccinated. And also families can fill out the consent form online such that they don't have to come with the kid. If a kid is over 18 years of age, they could get themselves vaccinated. We believe the best way to address this long-term is that everybody will get vaccinated to address this issue. What parents need to understand is they're listening to me. If your child is vaccinated and they are beyond the 2 vaccinations, they don't have to be quarantined. If they get exposed to somebody, they will not have to be quarantined. If they're not, it is likely they're going to be quarantined. And we believe right now that it is likely a kid can miss up to 30 days being quarantined because it's going to happen over and over and over again, especially if the vaccination numbers don't increase in schools. It's going to be a real challenge for schools across the country as we continue to vaccinate kids. So That's the back to school report. If there are any questions, I'll take them at this point in time. Rather lengthy report tonight because it's a lot of information to provide to the board, and there were some specific requests as well.
Dr. Adams, who are the ambassadors? Are they your staff members or?
They're central office staff that
okay.
are housed in this building for the most part. Curriculum staff, some deputies, superintendents, and those kind of people are ambassadors.
Also, how is the progress of the vaccination among staff going? Are we reaching the numbers we wanted to reach?
So I'll get an update and provide it to you on the 28th. I don't have any new information at this point in time. I was asked to try to get something because I know that question will come up tonight, but we're still working that. I think we've been so focused on the contact tracing. It seems to be staff is moving in that direction, but I don't have any real numbers. The last numbers we did have, Ms. Fowler, was about 300 persons said no, and about 800 persons had not submitted the information. All of those persons received the email from us last Friday indicating that they needed to be. Tomorrow or Thursday, they will get a personal letter signed by me indicating that they need to be vaccinated, and they have a short window to reprieve themselves in terms of doing that. On October the 15th, we will take the appropriate action that the board has given us authority to do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a question about the food service and the meal rates, but I wanted to know when it comes to serving the food, are we serving food inside of the classroom now? I know you said we were short on maintenance staff and someone to clean up. So I know it would be difficult to have a lot of students in the cafeteria, or if they're in the classroom and they're eating, how are we getting the classrooms cleaned up behind the students?
So at this point in time, 36 of our 42 elementary schools are participating in some portions of the breakfast in classroom program. The schools have been doing this over a period of time that they have some systems in place, but to your point, our staff, quite frankly, teachers and teacher aides are assisting in this effort as kids eat to quickly put the trash in the trash bins right outside the classroom door. So it's been working relatively well. We have a rhythm to this. I think this is year 3 or 4 of us doing it. It is a challenge in some of our elementary schools, as some of them only have one custodian, but right now staff is actually pitching in to help in this effort, but 36 schools are participating. So it may not be the entire school. It might be 1 or 2 grade levels actually participating as opposed to the entire school.
So if those team members participate in helping to clean up, are they going to be compensated for the extra effort?
The board approved something tonight that I think might be supporting some of that. Hopefully, as we roll this out, there may be some belief that staff could be looked at in terms of doing that beyond the school day, but not necessarily within the structure of the workday. So yes.
When the children are quarantined and are we also like testing their families as well, or helping the families?
We offer them an opportunity to, but we cannot even test the kid. We have antigen tests, which means that we could take a test this morning and get the results back in 15 minutes. Parents have to agree to do that. So if Calvin Adams in grades 5 come to school and I don't feel well, I could actually test that kid right there. If the parent gives us permission to do so, we get the result back and the kid can stay in school, or the parent can pick him up and because he's not feeling well and he could come back to school the next day. That has happened in some cases, in a lot of cases. I think we had, don't quote me, 25 of our buildings who can do antigen testing. The nurses can actually do antigen testing. I do want to frame this because I got some inquiries regarding it. Right now we have, I want to say, 10 nurse shortages. It's not that we don't have the money to pay for the nurses. We can't find nurses. We started the year with 4 shortages. 6 nurses in addition have quit since that point in time. So we are sharing nurses in 20 buildings right now. Compared to what we had last year, we were sharing nurses, and I think in like 30 buildings. And so it is a nurse shortage, but right now, to answer your question, we can test kids at the school site, but we're not testing families to come from home to do the test. We make them aware that the child is positive and encourage them where to go to get tested.
And could you talk a little bit about, I know we talked about this in an earlier presentation about what we've done with ventilation and filtration.
So 2 targeted schools we have targeted based upon our analysis. As I said before, on the 28th, I'll be bringing back a report to the board that will lay out everything that we are doing. But we have done an analysis right now of ventilation in our buildings, and we do have some buildings that have some challenges. We are remediating that the best we can right now, but the board will hopefully be approving something at the next board meeting around what we will be doing specifically. But 2 targeted buildings that had high risk, we have remediated those buildings based on analysis that we did.
As a follow-up to Ms. Sanye's question, are you getting pushback from the parents in reference to testing, getting permission, or them signing off on testing the kids?
So we had one of our middle schools, and I want to be careful about this because it was short notice, because the 2 entities, BJC and Affinia, we were finally able to get, not finally, but they were able to lean into supporting us on Thursday, and we got information on Friday. So out of about 500 kids, 4 were tested at one of our schools. At one of our high schools today, I don't know what the exact numbers were, Mr. Brown could tell me, but out of a population of about 900, some had already been tested. Let me just be clear. It's still a work in progress. The numbers are less than triple digits. I can say less than 100, and they can test up to 150 in a 2-hour window, up to 150 in a 2-hour window. But again, it is a work in progress. We're not going to stop. So every Thursday, we will be going to a school to provide the vaccine to families or to kids who parents give us permission to do so.
How are we dealing with, I'm hearing the work in progress on the quarantine aspect of things, but how are we dealing with the online, with them having to do virtual?
It's a real challenge. And let me frame what I mean by that. If a child has not returned their technology, the teachers are setting up virtual. And we're paying teachers extra service to set it up on their platform. And a kid can go online to do that. If a kid does not have technology, then that kid gets a 10-day packet of worksheets, if you will, and it's not necessarily in link with the teacher on a regular basis. The teacher is providing that work for them. The teacher is grading that work, but they don't have the interaction with the teacher in that classroom. So it is a challenge. I don't want to minimize it at all. It took us a couple of days to get up and running. Frankly, I really believe that many of our staff people did not believe that we would be quarantining on day 1. And so there was a lull of maybe 1 or 2 days. Dr. Smith, who's standing by, who's likely still behind me, has given a final deadline of this Friday to finalize everything, because I don't think people really understood the large number of quarantinings that would have to take place. At a football game this week, which was Vashon against Sodan and Gateway played against Roosevelt, there were over 225 kids that were quarantined from coming to the game because of the issue of quarantining. So the numbers are high. They're continuing to increase, but the bottom line is it's a real challenge if you don't have technology. It's a real challenge for families who don't have technology, although we're providing the packets and grading the packets and providing as much support by having, what do we call them? Teacher hours, meaning that kids could go online or call in to get assistance from the teacher. But it's a real challenge for a kid to be out of school for 10 to 14 days, in some cases 24 days, without any kind of technology support. And that's why I want to give the board the actual cost of what it was in terms of the technology challenges, so that the board could see what our real challenges around the number of kids that have not turned in equipment. We're finding as kids are quarantined, sometimes the families are saying, okay, I have the equipment, I'll bring it back now. But it's a real challenge if a kid doesn't have the technology. So it is a challenge, Ms. Cousins, and outside of the packets, I don't know what the answer is.
I had a question about the check-in process at the schools. I know we're taking their temperatures and taking them in small groups. So when I had a chance to do some school visits, I noticed that they were kind of waiting outside while that happened. Are we talking at all about, especially like since we're approaching winter and it getting colder outside, or weather concerns, any electronic processes to help speed up the check-in process?
A request has been made to purchase, to purchase an additional 20 of the units that you see out front for schools. When we started this last year, schools made the request to use the thermometer, the digital thermometer for the forehead, but now they're making requests for actual apparatus like you see, because it expedites moving it along faster. So it is likely we will be purchasing some additional equipment for those targeted schools.
Dr. Adams, as you know, the LA school district, one of them started requiring or have a mandate for students to get vaccinated. Have our staff, you and our staff, started those discussions at all?
We have.
Very good.
I'll leave it at that. Obviously, Los Angeles is a different environment than St. Louis. And so we have to take in consideration context. And so we are looking at all of those factors. As you know, the Attorney General has already filed a lawsuit against mask wearing in the state of Missouri. So we just want to be really careful, but we have had some discussions, but no decisions, no recommendation at this point in time. So I don't want to give anybody the impression that we're going to be asking everybody to be vaccinated, but we did see the article like you, and we did have some discussion around it. I want to thank the board at this point in time. Consent agenda, Madam President.
If I could get a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented. And a second.
I'd like to, is this the time that I would ask to pull one item?
That will come after we do the motion and the second, and then if there's any discussion or any item to be pulled.
Well, if it's going to be voted on separately, it needs to be a separate motion, or the original motion needs to be amended prior to the vote.
Okay. So I would like to make a motion to accept the the September consent agenda with the exception of the new item that was added. And which one do you have?
And the item would be 09-14-21-09.
And I'd like to do the exception of 0-14
21
09. Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah.
Second.
Ms. Williams.
Ms. Saunier. Yes. Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Ms. Fowler.
Yes.
Ms. Fowle.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Dr. Roberts.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Okay, Don. You pull.
Yes, on the item 09-14-21-09, the reason being that I think there is a serious conflict of interest in this particular vendor, seeing that they are currently on a board in Normandy, a collaborative board, and I think there would be a conflict of interest with what we're doing here in the city of St. Louis. And that is the reason for my hesitancy on wanting to approve this particular vendor.
Okay, Mr. St. Omar, can you speak to that?
Dr. Roberts, I am not aware, as I indicated previously, I'm not aware of a conflict of interest from a statutory or board policy perspective.
I'd just like to add that so there's not a motion on the table. It's just questions.
So somebody needs to make a motion and a second, and then
No.
To vote on it.
I make a motion to accept 9-14-21-09.
Second.
So the comment I have regarding this one is that I'm familiar with the work he's doing on the Normandy School Board, and he's really actually doing a lot of positive things. I mean, they're against charter schools, and he's just really helping them along. And I think he could be a real positive, be an asset to our district with what, based on what I'm hearing he's doing with Normandy, to be honest, because they're dealing with charters coming in, and he's actually been very beneficial to them. And maybe we could capitalize on some of that same work that he's doing for Normandy at this point in time.
Is there any other discussion?
Just Donna, was there anything specifically that he's done in that role?
I'm not going to go through naming a long list. I've just had the experience of working with this individual over the years, many, many years. But what I'd like to say is that I think a person in this particular position needs to be someone that's dedicated to public education and that has shown that over the years. And I cannot see that in this particular vendor at this particular time. And I just have no faith in this right now. I really don't. This would be another face of the board. We might as well, because they're going to be privileged to a lot of confidential information when it comes down to the boards and our decisions. And I just think it would be a bad decision to go with this particular vendor. That's my opinion.
So for me, I understand your hesitancy, especially with the history. And to be honest, the other alternative was much, much worse. I don't see this as an annual check to be cashed for somebody. I see this as a position that we get through for 1 year, maybe 2. Somebody who helps us kind of map these services of the city, but I want to reevaluate that at the end of this 1 year. So for this to get my support, it is definitely, I would like to look at this after 1 year of performance. I think it's a good idea to move forward with it now, but let's not just say, oh, this person's going to be here forever, or, operate under that. I mean, I do think that we need to be sending all kinds of things out for bid more often than we do, but I would be definitely willing to give it a try. And I do understand the history that has gone on there with the adversarial position, I feel, that's been expressed to me against SLPS and elected governance, but I'm hoping that we can use those connections to really map a good path forward through other institutions that operate within the city.
I just think it's unfortunate that we continue to outsource our power to other individuals instead of finding it within our own group. We're supposed to be leaders here on this particular board. I know that we set out to find someone that can negotiate with the city leaders and legislators or what have you, but when will the time come when we can just take a stand and start doing these things on our own? And now we're putting it in the hands of someone outside of our particular group. I just think it's time that we need to grow as a group and start to negotiate these things on our own. And that's just my opinion.
I think it is a testament to what the city and the state has, their regard for us, that we have to have this position at all, that we have to hire someone to go and talk to them, that they're not coming to us and asking what SLPS needs, but that is the reality that we're facing right now.
But the reality is that we really don't have to. That's why do we always feel like we have to give up our power to another entity to get something accomplished? When is the time going to come when we can do this ourselves? I mean, we have competent staff, there are people with bachelor degrees, doctors, and that kind of thing. So why is it that we cannot do this ourselves? We have highly intelligent people that are very familiar with what's going on in the district. When do we stop this and start taking our power back? This is not free. This is $62,000 that could go to someone that really knows the inside and out of St. Louis Public Schools.
I think one thing we should look at, which is what we as a board has formed, is the ad hoc legislative committee, correct? And part of that role of the ad hoc legislative committee is basically serving as the, not more so the oversight, but making sure that whomever is put in this position is doing the due diligence that we're wanting them to do. I think that's by creating that committee, that gives us as board members the voice that we need to really have and be more engaged with elected officials or whatever positions that are out there that affects the education and the decisions that we're able to make. So I don't want to assume that this person is just speaking solely on behalf of the board and representing just the board. That's really one of the main reasons why we created that ad hoc legislative committee.
I'd like to also add that we're not giving our power away to an individual. That individual is working to secure all of the resources that our students need in terms of advocating locally. Many of us, I don't work, and so I do attend those meetings, but my fellow colleagues also have responsibilities beyond this position on the board. And again, we will direct the course of action. We're not giving power away. We're trying to strengthen our leverage in terms of meeting the needs of our scholars.
I hear you, Donna. I understand where you're coming from. I've got concerns about, I mean, you know, we're asking somebody who's been around a long, long time and has been in politics a long, long time in this city. And that scares me a little bit because not everything that this person has, you know, represented is something that I think is in line with our values. Even just recently in terms of airport privatization and things like that. It's concerning to me. So I've been struggling with this. However, I've also been talking to some of our local leaders and sort of looking at what the landscape is. And I do think we need somebody, unfortunately, who has that reputation and that skill set at this particular time to, as Tony has said before, to get us access. I mean, I look at just the mayor's slate recently that she did for gun violence, and it's a corporate slate of people. We just don't have access to that. That's who this city always turns to, and that's who this city always shuts us out. And so I think that like I said, I've struggled with it, but I do think in talking to other people, this is a way to get us some access. And I will, you know, I think we all are incumbent on not giving away our power and making sure that it is this board's perspective that this person is representing. And so, you know, we are going to have to build that relationship and make sure that we have it. But in terms of getting us access to the city, I think Natalie's right. You know, we've gotten to a point where this has just become something that's important. So that's all. Thank you.
So the legislative committee, would you all be willing to, because you're taking on so much already, but would you be willing to maybe come up with some sort of yearly review before we put this out for RFP again, you know, to make sure that we are getting, maybe even if it's not the same person, or maybe if it is, you know, that we are getting what we really need for this $62,000 plus whatever else may come along. Is that something that you guys would be able to?
Who's the legislative committee? I'm just curious. Who?
Matt and Alicia right now.
I think you're on. I mean, we're all members of the legislative committee.
Oh,
we have a lot of administrative people from the administration on it. Representatives from the Union Parent Action Council. It's a big, large group of people. We're focusing mostly on state legislation right now. But I mean, I see this position. This is something new. This is something that, you know, came out previously before I was on the board. It came out very much specifically in terms of, you know, local leaders asking for it, asking for a way to have somebody that they can reach out to who's available more than board members are. And so, you know, I mean, I wouldn't call this an experiment, but I think that this is a starting point. So I think completely as a board, we'll have to revisit this, and hopefully, you know, if we select this person, maybe, you know, they can help us work with our local leaders to shape what this looks like in the future as a sustainable thing. I mean, I agree with you. This isn't something that we're going to try. And I do think that, getting us access and directing us to where we need to be in dealing with our municipal leaders is something that we need help with.
Are there any additional questions on this particular topic? Are we ready for the vote on this one?
Ms. Saunier? Ms. Cousins?
Yes.
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Ms. Fowle?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
No.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Motion passed.
And then on 2110, I make a motion that we accept 9/14/2110. Only question I had was, I guess I was wondering what the Business Plus system is and what it provides for the district.
So Mrs. Banks or Ms. Lanoy?
Well, Business Plus is our enterprise resource system. So it has our financial system and our payroll and HR system.
I understand now. Thank you. That's why I was just wondering what it did. It was a basic question. I just sent it in late. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Saunier?
Yes.
Ms. Cousins?
Yes.
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Ms. Vowell?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Ms. Jones? Yes. Dr. Roberts?
Yeah.
Motion passed.
Board member reports. Ms. Saunier?
I just think that, so I guess just as far as a report, I've gotten a whole lot of questions to my email, and I'm sure we all have about updates about where we are with the citywide educational plan. So just to let the public know that we certainly haven't forgotten about that, and that is, on our list of to-do and things we're working on. I got a chance to go to a retreat that the whole board was invited to this past Saturday, held by an organization called Local Progress, where we, myself, Matt, and Dr. Roberts got a chance to go, and we got a chance to just kind of talk about some of the things. And it was also with other board of aldermen and other local elected officials to talk about like overlining desires, points of interest, things that we might want, things that I think would certainly be beneficial to what we've been talking about today and what we talked about earlier.
None.
Matt.
Speaking of the Legislative and Advocacy Committee, we have our meeting tomorrow at 6 o'clock. Up to this point, we've sort of been working through identifying what our legislative priorities will be. So we're going to continue to refine that. Essentially, we've identified 3 major issues that we're going to look at. One is dealing with the issue of changes to local funding, which would impact funding of SLPS. Dr. Adams testified in Jefferson City recently about that, so we'll be discussing that tomorrow. We also are looking at addressing in Jefferson City, looking for funding to support efforts to combat trauma that is induced by gun violence in our city that the schools need to deal with. And third, we are looking to possibly develop some sort of requests for legislation to deal with the effects of homelessness amongst our student population. So we'll be working on that tomorrow, and then in the future meetings, until the end of the year before the legislative session begins in Jefferson City. We'll be fleshing out specific issues during those meetings. And most likely in December, we'll do a full presentation of our legislative priorities, as well as our full legislative platform, which we'll be voting on with this board in October or November. So that's the work that we're doing on that as well. Also on the legislative committee, there is some update on our local efforts in terms of the moratorium. The Board of Aldermen are coming back into session, and we've been told that moratorium issue has been referred to the Education and Youth Matters Committee, which will be taking it up shortly, and it is expected to pass. So if anybody does know an alderperson who is on the fence about that, please encourage them to support that moratorium. One final report is, so tomorrow's legislative and advocacy committee, Parent Action Council, is on Thursday at 6:30. That's open to parents. That Zoom link, you have to request it by emailing them, and it is a star-studded roster that they have. It's Dr. Adams, there's just a whole bunch of people on there. I'll be giving an update on legislative committee and as well as Gloria Nolan, our parent liaison. So it's going to be a great meeting. Board members are invited to attend. If you need the link, just let me know. That's 6:30 on Thursday. I think that's it. It's a busy week.
Yeah, just the governance committee will reconvene on next Thursday, September 23rd. And our goal is to get through all of our board bylaws and our onboarding process by the end of the year. I just want to say something about the Parent Action Council. I think that's a great group. I just want to hope the district will work with maybe parents or homes that don't have the technology to make sure they can be included in that group to ensure that voices from all parents are heard.
Donna? No. Okay. Natalie?
Dr. Adams, stop me if I'm saying anything too much. I reached out to Dr. Adams with regard to the refugees coming from Afghanistan. And I was pleased to know, I can't give away too many details yet, but I was pleased to know that the district does already have procedures in place. And we are working with the International Institute to welcome those students to the city. So, and make sure that St. Louis Public Schools is their education of choice. So I'm really glad to hear that. And I just wanted to report on the great work the district is doing in that respect.
Thank you, Natalie. I'd like to share that the full board is moving forward with plans around the citywide planning, and that information will be forthcoming. I think I speak for the board when I say we are all full of gratitude for our parents, for our scholars, for our leadership at the district leadership, and for all of the helping hands at the building level who have done such a tremendous job in welcoming everyone back to school. I've had an opportunity to visit all the schools in the district, and I was pleasantly surprised by what I observed. The kids are happy to be back in school, and I'm happy to say that we do choose SLPS. Now, for our guest speakers, our public comment section, thank you for your patience. Mr. Clement, would you come forward?
Mr. Clements, the mic is not on, so she's going to turn it off for you right quick. There you go. Thank you.
Concerning the Better Futures plan and working with this group of organizations, my recommendation is not to do it. I think it's a quagmire and a trap for you guys. If you do it, it seems like that's the way it's going. I don't think Tashara Jones should be co-chair of Better Futures. It's a conflict of interest. Her legislative career was spent advancing charter schools and denigrating St. Louis public schools. She supported the removal of the elected board in 2007 and the imposition of a private board, the SAB. Like charter school boards, it's a private board. The SAB was a disaster for the students of St. Louis public schools. There has been minimum transparency and no accountability for the collapse of MAP scores under the SAB, and she supported the SAB. I didn't see any of these groups protesting or saying anything about the equity issue with a private board and what the SAB did. Board members from Forward Through Ferguson contributed thousands of dollars to Tashara's mayoral campaign. Sharita Love, who you met 817 of Education Equity, gave her $300. Maxine Clark and her husband gave her at least $5,100. By the way, Maxine's Delmar Divine gets 95% tax abatement for 15 years, plus state, federal, and city tax credits. And I don't know what is a more blatant example of racial inequity than poor Black school children being denied services because white millionaires demand the school's tax money. I don't see anybody complaining about it from these groups, supposed equity and inclusion. Is there outrage about the diversion of tax money from poor kids to Maxine Clark and Bob Fox, who live in Clayton, by Tashara, by Forward Through Ferguson, by We Power, by Education Equity? I haven't seen any of it. Tashara's loyalties are with the charter school syndicate, and I think that's what we're going to see from her. If Sharita Love of Education Equity is serious about confronting oppression, as her website counsels, why doesn't she confront Maxine Clark and Bob Fox? Forward Through Ferguson has on its board Trina James, the founder of Jama Charter School, which from the day it opened was failing, and every year after that. It closed in 2015 at the bottom of all the charter schools in the state. She's on the board there. R. Nelson Williams, an attorney with Thompson Coburn on the board of Forward Through Ferguson, was on the board of the Shearwater High School Charter School, open for 3 years, closed for poor performance. Justin Eidelberg on the board of Forward Through Ferguson is also on the board of Delmar Divine. Zach Boyers, chairman and CEO of the U.S. Bancorp Community Development Corporation on the board of FTF, is also the financial fixer for Delmar Divine. These groups are not really about equity inclusion. They are about Maxine Clark's obsession with charter school. That's what it was obvious from just looking cursory, seeing the meeting on 817. We now see that this syndicate of phony equity groups is weaponized by white oligarchs against the most democratic, racially inclusive institution in the St. Louis area, the St. Louis Public Schools. St. Louis Public Schools and their elected board are the true champions of racial equity and democratic values. There has to be an opt-out option if you guys go ahead with this. For the SLPS, if the interests of the SLPS are not protected under that future plan, so that, it's not whatever happens with the plan, we're going along with it. If the interests of the SLPS are not protected, we're opting out. And I'd also ask that the public comments be moved back to the beginning of the meetings. It's a lot more convenient, I think. Thank you very much. I want to commend the administrative staff and the board. I'm worn out listening to Dr. Adams talk about all of the challenge that we have getting started here. So I commend everybody for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Babs.
To President Roberts, Dr. Adams, and the other esteemed members of the St. Louis Public School Board of Education, greetings. My name is Dontanya Batts. I'm an education justice advocate from Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm a wife, parent, former charter school teacher, and a former support staff member at a public school. I serve on national, state, and local boards dedicated to the preservation of public schools with a democratically elected school board. I am missing one son's tennis match, and I missed one son's soccer game today to be with you to share the vision of what St. Louis Public School District has a high potential of looking like in the near future. The new St. Louis Education Blueprint, peddled by Better Futures STL, sounds a lot like the NEO plan that was solicited in Indianapolis in 2013 by the Mind Trust, which is the equivalent to your Opportunity Trust here. The NEO plan was shot down by community members and was resurrected as Live, Work, Play and Innovation Network Schools. Almost the exact same plan went unnoticed by many of the same community members who defeated the original NEO plan. Thus, my fear for St. Louis Public Schools and the city of St. Louis. The city funds Opportunity Trust, Education Equity Center of Indianapolis, Forward Through Ferguson, We Power, and others are operating to push agendas laced in the language of equity, but have inequitable outcomes indeed. In Indianapolis, our mayor's office, the Mind Trust, and Stand for Children created a parallel school system of charter schools in the name of innovation. Our Innovation Network schools have school boards that are made up of people who often do not send their children to those schools, and or board members who may live in another state altogether. Free resources from our district are made available to these schools, which are legally connected to the district by a contract, but operate independently. Parents are recruited to advocate for these charter schools under the umbrella of the district, believing that these schools are better quality than the traditional school, but the traditional schools are intentionally underfunded and under-enrolled each year. Be aware that the amount of money needed to run an effective school board campaign will increase astronomically. About 11 years ago, a common citizen could run for school board for about $2,500. In Indianapolis, campaign finance records indicate that some campaigns raised and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars for a nonpartisan school board race. Once the majority of the board is compromised of members who support the dismantling of St. Louis public schools and administrators leave to open their own nonprofits that the district contracts with, your district will look a lot like Indianapolis Public School District, where the legacy of so many who fought for all to be educated is erased by private entities where the public is no longer has a voice. While legally defined as public schools and funded with public dollars, charter schools and their appointed school boards are not public. Diane Ravitch says, our schools will not improve if we continue to close neighborhood schools in the name of reform or innovation, and in your case, consortium. Neighborhood schools are often the anchors of their communities, a steady presence that helps to cement the bond of community among neighbors. If you want a better future for St. Louis, learn from the people recruited to advocate against their own interests, then woke up.
I move that we suspend our bylaws to allow her to finish her comments.
Well, I'm done.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you for coming all this way.
Thank you for our public comments, and I get a motion in a second to close.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Ms. Sonnier? Yes. Ms. Cousins?
Yes.
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.